He is a writer for Sactown Royalty with some great material, and I'm telling you, it's a lot of good stuff right there that you get on that website. But also, he's a host of the King's Pulse podcast, which I believe is 3 days a week. A lot of amazing, amazing stuff on there. It's getting more and more popular. I think by the end of the year, it's going to overtake Howard Stern. And I'm telling you, Rich Ivanowski, he's the real deal, and he's with us this morning. Welcome, Rich, to the show.
Hey, thank you, Tarik. I am excited to be here, man.
Yeah, you better be. No, I'm just kidding around. Thanks for being here. It's a pretty exciting morning here, and well, I think it's time we talk some Sacramento Kings basketball. What do you think?
Absolutely. I'm up for it.
Here we are. So, yes. All right. Well, we're going to start out by saying, the Sacramento Kings free agency just happening. Boy, it was a big one. And, I mean, we kind of have to take it move by move because the Kings really had a very solid free agent crop. And we're going to start out by talking about the one guy they re-signed, Harrison Barnes. 4 years, $85 million. Now, I'll start out by asking this: What do you think? Maybe a little bit of an overpay for him?
Maybe a little bit, but I think you said it there when you said they had a very solid offseason. That's what this move is to me. That's what this player is to me. Harrison Barnes is a very solidifying figure. He's a 3-and-D wing, and those are hard to come by. He's an experienced vet, but still only 26 years old, going to be, just 30 years old by the time this contract expires. So this, to me, is maybe a $5 to $10 million overpay, but that's kind of how it goes when you're in a small market.
Yeah, and actually I did read up on, and I don't know if it was you or Carmichael Dave who mentioned this on Twitter, about how there's like certain shoe deals in big markets that actually increase revenue for players that Sacramento does not have. So do you think that may have to go into like part of the decision making as far as like how much money to give players like him, because of maybe the overpay makes more sense because the Lakers may not have to do that because they have the shoe deals down there?
For sure, and it's all manner of things. LeBron is probably making twice as much in endorsements as he is in actual NBA salary, and he started all of those businesses he has. He owns that pizza place now. It's like a huge chain expanding into the world, and also you got to think that the Kings aren't really title contenders. So when it comes down to what players want, Sacramento can't quite offer those title hopes just yet, and they can't offer those big money deals outside of the league. So, I think that to get a solid above average player at the small forward position, a position of need, this is a win.
I agree. I think it is a big win for the Kings. They get that solid player, as you said. And I think another win for them was the second move they made, and I think one a lot of people in the Kings fan community really wanted was Dwayne Dedmon, who they got for 3 years, $40 million to take over, for the moment, that center position. Now I'll ask you, I think you're very high, if I remember correctly, on Dedmon. What do you like about him so much?
Yeah, so this is an A-plus move in my book. What I love about Dedmon is that he's going to stretch the floor. So any Kings fans out there listening, you may have been a fan of Lee Cauley-Stein, you may not have been. What everyone liked about him was his ability to get vertical and run in transition, dunk the ball, some explosive plays. Dedmon can do all of that, but he can also shoot the three, which is going to create more space for Marvin Bagley to work down low, and going to give more driving lanes for Fox, more passing lanes. He should be unlocking this offense in a very real way starting next season.
Yeah, and I agree with you. And another thought that came into my mind before free agency, we were all talking about maybe Al Horford and via trade, or even or actually that would be free agency, I suppose, or a trade for Clint Capella. But those guys would have had extraordinary price tags, and honestly, they kind of bind you for your future, and that would not have allowed the Kings to have the depth they have with all these other moves. So honestly, I think this is probably the best case scenario in a way.
I agree. This was my number one guy in the center free agency market, and at around $13.33 million each season for 2 seasons guaranteed and 1 final season partially guaranteed. that's a really good deal. That's below market value. He's a guy that is, if the Kings feel they need to move on from him, that's a tradable contract. So I don't see any downside at all.
Yeah, I think that's a low-risk, high-reward move. And speaking of maybe another low-risk, high-reward move, this one actually kind of surprised me a little bit. The Kings then went out like a few hours later, because all of this happens like just like that. Like I could look away from my phone 5 minutes later, somebody just got signed. Trevor Ariza, 2 years, $25 million. A guy that the Kings had supposedly had their eye on a year ago, maybe 2 years ago, and now they get him for an incredibly cheap price tag. Now, what do you think of this one?
This one is probably the signing that I'm the lowest on, but again, you got to think that's I'm actually high on all of them, so this is. If I have to try to nitpick, you can say getting a guy who's Ariza's age, 34 years old. He may be a little bit over the hill, but again, you're getting a guy that's got 109 career playoff games under his belt. This is a guy that's won an NBA Finals. He's got a ring at home. That's going to bring the experience to this Kings locker room that they haven't really had.
Yeah, and I think he'll be a great depth, and I think he really helps the Kings because Bogdan Bogdanovic maybe gets to focus more on the 1 and the 2, backing up the 1 and the 2, maybe not having to like defend those forwards like he had to at certain points last year.
Yeah, absolutely. Going into last season, there was no small forwards on the roster, and now the Kings have Harrison Barnes and Trevor Ariza.
Yeah, and they don't have Justin Jackson. Anyway, so that's a little joke for us Kings junkies out there. But anyway, he's not here now. Corey Joseph, that's another signing they had. This one's very interesting because I think it's funny after the Ariza signing, you mentioned on Twitter, hey, that all you got to do is get Corey Joseph, or they got to get this backup point guard. And what do? They follow your rules. I think Vlade saw your tweet and said, "Oh, that's a good idea," and they sign him. Corey Joseph, 3 years, $37 million. I think you like this one a lot.
I do like this one a lot. The money's a little bit more than I had expected, but again, we talked about the Sacramento tax. It's completely understandable that he needs a few extra million to come to Sacramento. They did a nice job here because Corey Joseph was a legitimate candidate for many starting jobs across the league. Kings probably had to pay a little bit extra to keep him away from teams like Orlando and Phoenix, even the Bulls. But, yeah, they got a guy here who is an elite defender. He's absolutely, a top 5 defender of opposing guards. He's going to join De'Aaron Fox, who also has a tremendous defensive upside at the point guard position, and that means there's 48 minutes of lockdown defense coming, and opposing point guards aren't going to really want to see that. It's going to be really fun to watch. He and Dedmon, who we mentioned before, they're Popovich guys, both coming from the Spurs earlier in their careers and going on to great things, as so many of those guys do.
Indeed. And I think I like what you mentioned earlier when you were talking about how Corey Joseph, he could have gone to the Bulls, he could have gone to the Suns, could have gone to a lot of quote-unquote rebuilding teams. And by Corey Joseph taking a backup job in Sacramento really goes to show, I think it says a lot about Sacramento's direction, that they're going in the right direction where they're a step above these, a team like the Bulls that might be in a bigger market but aren't as successful. It says that maybe Sacramento might be on the right track if they're getting these kind of players and might be building something towards the future. Would you agree with this assessment?
Oh, absolutely. They've taken themselves out of the bottom of the barrel, no question about it. If you ask any player in the league, would they rather play for the Knicks or the Kings? I think they're telling you the Kings.
Well, I don't know if that's saying much. It's the Knicks, but
Right. No, absolutely. I just mean that, traditionally you think that the Knicks are, the biggest market in the world, and one of the most historic teams in the league, one of the teams that, I guess, if you rewound 10 years, this would be a joke of a question. But yeah, now it's clear as day that the Kings are really building something. They've got a nice group of exciting young players, and within 5 years they might be, even higher near the top of the league.
Yeah, and they're fun to watch regardless. I mean, even now they're one of the most fun teams to watch in the NBA. Fast pace. It's great. It's great. There is one more signing we're going to get to here. Rashawn Holmes. This one actually, I thought they were done after Corey Joseph, but hey, Vlade said no. Vlade Divac, he signed Rashawn Holmes, a big guy who played for the Suns last year, 2 years, $10 million. Now, what are your thoughts on this move?
This is a nice value. This is exactly sort of the contract that I had envisioned for him. So I don't see it as an overpay or necessarily a huge value. But he's a great energy guy. Off the bench, he's going to give you really hard-fought minutes. He's basically a defensive stud and then also a great scorer on offense. But the question is, can he do it on a larger scale? Because he's been a backup his whole career.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, but we'll see. I think honestly he'll be good depth and probably actually good competition for Harry Giles when it comes to the reserve position for center and the big man spot. So that's most of the moves. They might sign another, and maybe they do another two-way contract like they did to Kyle Guy. But that is, for the most part, the offseason for the Kings. So if the offseason ended today, nobody got traded again, because it seems like every day somebody's getting traded in the NBA. What would you say is the offseason grade for the Sacramento Kings, like at this moment right now?
Yeah, this is a legitimate A. I think that there were moves out there that could have been splashier. They could have gone all in for Al Horford, Nikola Vucevic. They could have gone all in for these, all-star level players. But at that point, you're kind of spending all your money or most of your money on one guy, and those guys are generally older. We don't know if that fourth year, that career is going to be a massive overpay. You're going to be paying $35 million for a guy that just is not giving you anything on the court. This is the ideal way to do this. You break it into 3 or 4 slots, and you bring in guys that can really fill every hole, every need for this team.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, it's looking like it's going to be another fun year of Sacramento Kings basketball. Well, Rich, we do have a story regarding your wedding back, I believe this was last month, correct?
Yeah, that's right.
Yes. So, if I'm correct, you sent out a tweet on Twitter saying that if you had 10,000 retweets on the certain tweet you sent out, that you would be able to wear a Harry Giles purple Sacramento Kings jersey as a part of your wedding attire. Now, that's all I'll say. Like, could you describe what happens afterwards for the general public?
Yeah, so my very kind now wife allowed me to give this a try. She said she wanted 10,000 retweets if I was to wear a Kings jersey to our wedding. And yeah, I tagged Harry Giles, who's the guy whose jersey I would be wearing. Probably my favorite King as of right now, for sure. He's still breaking out, still got a long way to go, but just a great guy off the court. I think we all see it here in Sacramento.
Yeah.
And so he saw that. He retweeted it. He got Willie Cauley-Stein to retweet it, and Buddy Hield retweeted it, and also one of Giles' teammates from college, Jason Tatum of the Boston Celtics.
Oh, wow.
He put it out there, and yeah, the Kings themselves got behind it. Their PR team reached out to me, and basically it just exploded and got to 10,000 in a couple of days.
Yeah, I think you were on Good Day Sacramento, and there were, because I was watching, I turned on the TV, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's Rich. And I saw it, and, they were looking at the retweets, and you were at 9.9, like, on the show. I mean, it went really, really fast, and you got it.
Yeah, it went super fast, and yeah, we got it, and my wife and I, we got married in Mexico last month, and I was wearing that Giles jersey.
Yeah, and I'm telling you, it looked like a beautiful wedding, which I know it sounds cliche to say. It looked even more beautiful with that Harry Giles jersey underneath the blazer. Gotta say, I can't lie. But it looked like a beautiful wedding, and with all Kings apparel aside, even though it was amazing, congratulations to you and your now wife. That's very exciting stuff, and best of wishes for your future there.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and well, with that, let's get back into basketball. Dun-dun-dun. So, NBA free agency. So you thought the Kings free agency was intense. Oh boy, the NBA decided to hit shuffle. If this was if the NBA was Spotify, we just hit shuffle because man, I mean, it was crazy. If we were to go over every single move, we'd be here all day. I will ask you, what teams do you feel like maybe won this offseason? And what teams do you felt like really declined as a result of this offseason?
Yeah, so I guess I'll start with the declining teams. Boston probably struggles a little bit, at least for a little while. They did end up getting Kemba Walker, who is his superstar in his own right, but they lost Kyrie Irving. They lost their backup point guard, Terry Rozier, and they lost veteran center Al Horford. That's a big hit.
Yeah.
It's tough. And then Golden State just down the road, down 80 there in the Bay. They lost Kevin Durant, although he has a torn Achilles, so it's not likely that he would have played this season anyway. But when it comes to the future of the Golden State Warriors, that's definitely up in the air. Those probably would be my two biggest losers, but as far as teams that are on the rise, there's no doubt that the LA Clippers are now the favorite, the odds-on favorite to win it all, adding Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. That's two top 10 players right there that just joined in the team that was already in the playoffs. So they were just an 8th seed last year, but now you add two superstars to that mix. It feels like they are, the odds-on favorite, right, to come out of the West. And the other team that made an improvement in the West, or a significant improvement in the West, is the Utah Jazz. I think that people are kind of sleeping on them a little bit. They added Bojan Bogdanovic, and they added Mike Conley, and those guys are not quite stars. They're actually not quite, they're maybe all-star level at best, but that team just needed a few more pieces, and they've been a very good team for years now. They've been 5 seed. They've been in the mix. They've been in the second round of the playoffs for a couple of years straight, and to just add two solid veteran role players there really rounds out their starting 5. I wouldn't be surprised to see them finish second right behind the Clippers in the West, and then, of course, LA didn't do too much, the LA Lakers, that is, they didn't do too much in free agency, but they did make that trade for Anthony Davis, and that's significant. We'll see how it all works out. That's significant. And finally, over in the East, you'd probably have to say that Philadelphia and the Brooklyn Nets were the biggest winners there. Brooklyn getting Kyrie Irving and the injured Kevin Durant, and Philadelphia adding Al Horford.
Yeah, and keeping Tobias Harris, which is kind of key because he's almost like a win in itself, just keeping him. The one thing I will ask you, with the Clippers getting Leonard, which I think shocked the world, especially people on ESPN, not going to mention any names, Jalen Rose, but just looking at the Houston Rockets just a few days ago, acquiring Russell Westbrook for Chris Paul and a ship's worth. Ship, I say S-H-I-P. I didn't mean to make it sound like anything else. First-round picks. And I do have to ask you, do you think the Russell Westbrook move for the Rockets was kind of a response to a lot of these superstar duos coming together, like Kyrie and Kevin Durant, like AD and LeBron, like Steph Curry and Klay Thompson right now in Golden State? Do you think it's a kind of a response of panic, or is this going to be a good move, do you think, for the Rockets?
Yeah, I do think that it was a little bit of panic. I think that when Golden State fell out, when they lost Kevin Durant to injury, when they lost Klay Thompson to injury, it felt like the path was clear for them to make the move and to come out of the West and go to the finals finally. Like we mentioned, then the Clippers made some incredible moves. The Lakers added Anthony Davis. The Utah Jazz made some really solid moves, and all of a sudden they felt like maybe the 4th best team in the West. And this is probably their attempt to regain some footing there. Personally, though, I don't really see it as a tremendous upgrade. I think that
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, Chris Paul is very, the thing is that this really improves is the health and the age of the team, because Chris Paul is 34. He missed significant time each of the last 2 years, including missing the playoffs, a majority of it this last offseason, or this last postseason, excuse me. So maybe they get a guy who is going to be on the floor more often, and that's a good thing. But Russell Westbrook is pretty far removed from his MVP level season a couple of years ago, and he wants the ball in his hands all the time and doesn't play defense. That reminds you of another player on the team, James Harden. Wants the ball in his hands all the time, doesn't play defense. So I think that sometimes it's easy to hide that with 4 other good defenders around James Harden, but now you've got 2 guys with the same problem, and you got to wonder how they hide 2 of those guys.
Yeah, I'm not so sure if they're really a better team. In fact, they're still going to be great, and they'll probably make the playoffs next year. I still give it like a 90% chance. So 2 last questions for you. I had to fit this one in because I know it's not the Kings, and I know it's a team that might not be great next year, but the Phoenix Suns go into free agency thinking, okay, we have some money to spend. We can do some good stuff. And what do? They signed Ricky Rubio, I believe, 3 years, $51 million. Now, could you say this is the worst move of the offseason? Because I can't think of a worse one than signing Ricky frickin' Rubio to this kind of contract. Do you justify this at all, or I don't get this?
Yeah, no, it's a terrible contract. The way they can justify it is that they really, really desperately need a point guard. But at the same time, there was a lot of other point guards available. They could have gotten Tomas Satoransky, but he went to the Bulls. They could have gotten Corey Joseph, but he went to the Kings. Those are the types of moves that they should have gone. They should have gone after maybe Tyus Jones or Dalen Wright. These guys were all moving this summer. What the only move that I think was worse than that. They're probably my second worst contract. But the poor Charlotte Hornets paying Terry Rozier $20 million a year.
Yeah, that's a bit crazy.
That's dreadful.
Yeah. I mean, for a backup point guard, making almost what Harrison Barnes did, and we're considering Barnes an overpay. Oh my! But anyway, money's money. I guess I guess it grows more than Phoenix. But anyway, I'll ask you this one last thing: prediction. If we were to start the season with the rosters that we have right now, we don't have the schedule yet, but we have an idea of what it might look like, obviously. It's same opponents. What is the Kings' record, and do they make the playoffs if the season started today?
Yeah, I will go with 46-win season, and they do make the playoffs.
Okay. Wow, you think they knock out the Spurs or probably edge themselves in the 8th seed?
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I think the Spurs are the team to knock out right now. It's really hard to say that because Greg Popovich is such an unbelievable, incredible coach. He seems to get it done no matter what every year, but I think this is the year that the rising tide, finally gets to him in the West. There's just too many good teams, and Boston Bagley are going to continue to grow. A lot of these other guys are going to continue to grow, and I think that we're going to surpass some of those older, slower teams like San Antonio.
I completely agree, and I'm hoping that's the case. But either way, very fun season of Kings basketball, and you can hear him right here on the Voice of the Foothills listeners on KAHI. But Rich Ivanowski from Sactown Royalty Kings Pulse, thanks so much. And, it's been an honor. We hope to have you on in October for a possible Kings preview. Maybe, yes, kind of, hell, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That would be great.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you so much for joining the show, and we hope you have a great rest of your summer and try to stay dry out there. I know with the beard it might be a little tough.
Thank you, man. Thanks for having me on.